Charlie Munger spent decades building wealth, but he spent just as much time watching other people lose theirs. And in almost every case, the destruction didn't come from bad investments or market crashes or bad luck. It came from people. Specifically, 3 types of people who show up in your life and systematically destroy your financial future. Munger was obsessed with this pattern because it was so predictable. A smart person with good income and solid financial habits would meet the wrong person. A business partner, a spouse, a friend, and within a few years, everything they'd built would be gone. Not damaged, not set back. Completely gone. The tragedy was that these people rarely announced themselves as threats. They didn't show up with warning labels. They often seemed helpful, supportive, even necessary. They told you what you wanted to hear. They made you feel understood. They validated your dreams and ambitions. And while you were feeling good about the relationship, they were quietly destroying your wealth. Munger identified 3 archetypes that appeared again and again in the wreckage of ruined fortunes. He called them the drain, the delusional, and the destroyer. Each one operated differently. Each one was dangerous in their own way. But they all had one thing in common: if you let them into your financial life, you would regret it. This isn't about being cynical or paranoid. Munger wasn't advocating for isolation or mistrust. He was advocating for discernment. For recognizing that some people, no matter how much you like them, no matter how much history you have with them, no matter how uncomfortable it feels to cut them off, are financial poison. And the sooner you identify them, the more of your wealth you'll save. Most people learn this lesson too late. They discover they've been carrying a financial parasite only after years of damage. By then the money is gone, the opportunities are missed, and the relationships have usually destroyed themselves anyway. Munger's advice was simple: learn to spot these people early, and remove them from your life without hesitation or guilt. The first archetype Munger identified was the drain. This is the person who consistently needs financial help. Not once in an emergency, everyone hits hard times, but repeatedly, predictably, with an endless supply of crises that somehow always require your money. The drain comes in many forms: the family member who's always between jobs, the friend who has a new business idea every 6 months and needs startup capital, the romantic partner who never quite gets their finances together, the adult child who can't seem to launch into independence. What makes the drain so dangerous is that they're often people you genuinely care about. They're not strangers trying to scam you. They're people with real relationships, real history, real emotional claims on your sympathy, and they know exactly how to leverage that sympathy into financial support. Munger watched a colleague destroy his retirement, helping a brother who was perpetually in crisis. The brother lost his job, needed help with rent. Started a business, needed seed money. Business failed, needed help with debt. Got divorced, needed legal fees covered. Had medical issues, needed help with bills. Every crisis was real. Every request was reasonable in isolation. But over 15 years, the colleague had transferred nearly $400,000 to his brother. Money that should have been compounding in retirement accounts was instead funding a lifestyle the brother couldn't sustain on his own. The cruel part was that none of it helped. The brother was no better off after 15 years of support. He hadn't learned to manage money. He hadn't developed self-sufficiency. He'd simply learned that when things got hard, his brother would bail him out. The support had become the problem, enabling dysfunction instead of solving it. Munger believed that the key to identifying a drain is the pattern, not the individual crisis. Everyone needs help sometimes, but the drain needs help constantly. Their crises are never-ending, because they never address the underlying cause, usually a fundamental inability or unwillingness to live within their means. The drain has certain tells. They're always optimistic about the future, despite a history of failure. They have elaborate explanations for why their problems aren't their fault. They're hurt and confused when you suggest they might be contributing to their own difficulties. They make you feel guilty for having money while they struggle. And here's the insidious part. They genuinely believe they'll pay you back. They promise it every time. This is just temporary. Once I get back on my feet, I'll return everything. But they never do, because they never get back on their feet. They move from crisis to crisis, and you move from being helpful to being an enabler. Munger's advice on drains was brutal and simple: cut them off, not partially, not with conditions, completely. Because every dollar you give them is a dollar you're stealing from your own future, and you can't help someone who won't help themselves. You can only subsidize their dysfunction until you're broke too. The emotional cost of cutting off a drain is real. They'll be hurt. They'll accuse you of abandoning them. Other people might judge you. Family gatherings become awkward. But Munger believed the alternative was worse, spending your life financially hobbled by someone else's inability to manage their own life, than reaching old age with nothing because you sacrificed your security for their comfort. Most people can't do this. They feel too guilty. So they keep giving, keep hoping things will change, keep believing this will be the last time. And they wake up at 60 years old having transferred hundreds of thousands to someone who's no better off, while they themselves have nothing saved. The drain is fine with this outcome. They've always been fine living off others. The question is whether you're willing to let them live off you. Munger had his own experience with a drain, and it taught him this lesson permanently. Early in his legal career, he had a friend from college who became a serial entrepreneur. The friend was charismatic, full of ideas, always on the verge of the next big thing, and he was perpetually broke. The friend would pitch Munger on investments, restaurant concepts, real estate deals, import-export schemes. Each one was going to be huge. Each one needed just a little seed capital, and each one failed, usually within a year. At first, Munger said yes out of friendship and genuine belief in the opportunities. The amounts were small enough that losing them wouldn't hurt, but the pattern emerged quickly. Failure, new idea, new pitch, new money, new failure. The friend never seemed to learn from mistakes. He never questioned whether maybe he wasn't cut out for entrepreneurship. He just moved on to the next idea with undiminished enthusiasm. After about 5 years and $50,000 transferred, Munger did the math. That money, if invested conservatively, would have grown substantially. Instead, it was gone, converted into failed business inventory, unpaid leases, and learning experiences that apparently taught nothing. Munger sat his friend down and said no more. No more investments. No more loans. No more opportunities. The friend was devastated. He accused Munger of giving up on him, of not believing in his potential, of being a bad friend. He said all the things drains say when their source of funding cuts them off. Munger held firm, and within a year, the friend had found new investors to fund his ventures. He didn't need Munger's money. He needed someone's money. Anyone's money. Munger's refusal hadn't ended the friendship in any meaningful way because the friendship had been transactional from the start, though neither of them had fully acknowledged it. 20 years later, the friend was still churning through business ideas and other people's capital. He was no wealthier, no wiser, no more successful, but Munger's $50,000, if it had been invested instead of donated, would have grown to over $200,000. That lesson stuck. What Munger realized from this experience was that you can't save a drain by giving them money. You can only drain yourself trying. The drain's problem isn't lack of capital, it's lack of judgment, discipline, or realistic self-assessment. Money doesn't fix those problems. It just delays the inevitable while costing you your own financial security. The hardest part about dealing with a drain, Munger believed, is that they're often good people with real problems. They're not malicious. They're not trying to hurt you. They genuinely believe the next thing will work. They genuinely intend to pay you back. Their optimism is real, even if it's completely detached from reality. But good intentions don't pay compound interest. Genuine affection doesn't fund your retirement. And at some point you have to choose between their endless crises and your own financial future. Munger chose his future, and he watched too many people choose the drain and regret it for the rest of their lives. The second archetype Munger identified was the delusional. This person is different from the drain. The delusional isn't asking for handouts. They're offering you opportunities, big opportunities, life-changing opportunities. Opportunities that exist only in their imagination, but that they'll convince you are real. The delusional is often a business partner, a co-founder, or a close friend with entrepreneurial ambitions. They have vision. They have passion. They have elaborate plans. What they don't have is any connection to reality, but they're so convincing that you won't realize this until you've invested time, money, and opportunity cost that you'll never get back. Munger watched countless people lose fortunes to delusional partners. The pattern was always the same. The delusional person has an idea, usually a big transformative idea that's going to disrupt an industry or create a new market. They're persuasive. They can paint a vivid picture of success. They have answers for every objection, explanations for every risk, projections that show exponential growth. You get excited. This person's confidence is infectious. Maybe this really is the big opportunity. Maybe you'd be a fool to pass it up. So you invest money, time, credibility, connections. And at first, it feels exciting. You're building something. You're part of a vision. Then reality starts intruding. The market doesn't respond the way the delusional partner predicted. Customers don't materialize. The technology doesn't work as promised. Revenue projections were wildly optimistic. Basic assumptions were wrong. But here's what makes the delusional so dangerous. They never admit the idea was flawed. They always have an explanation for why things haven't worked yet. The market wasn't ready. The execution wasn't quite right. They just need a little more time, a little more money, a little more patience. The vision is still valid. It's the circumstances that are temporarily unfavorable. Munger knew a lawyer who partnered with a delusional entrepreneur on a tech startup in the early 2000s. The entrepreneur had a vision for software that would revolutionize the legal industry. He had mock-ups, white papers, testimonials from lawyers who'd seen demos. It looked legitimate. The lawyer invested $200,000 and 3 years of part-time work. The entrepreneur was always optimistic, always had explanations for delays, always had new pivots and strategies. But the product never materialized. 3 years in, they had a barely functional prototype that no one wanted to buy. The lawyer finally forced an honest conversation. The entrepreneur admitted that the technical challenges were harder than anticipated, that building the team had been difficult, that maybe the market timing wasn't right. But he still believed in the vision. He wanted to keep trying. He needed more investment. The lawyer walked away. The $200,000 was gone. The 3 years were gone. And the opportunity cost, what that money could have become, what those years could have been spent building, was incalculable. Meanwhile, the entrepreneur quickly found new investors and continued pursuing his delusional vision. What makes the delusional so hard to identify early is that they're not lying. They genuinely believe their own vision. They're not con artists running a scam. They're true believers who happen to be completely wrong about what's possible. Their confidence isn't an act. It's a delusion, which makes it much more convincing than any conscious deception would be. Munger's test for identifying the delusional was simple. Check their track record. Have they successfully executed on big visions before? Have they built businesses that actually worked? Have they demonstrated the ability to turn ideas into sustainable reality? If not, their confidence is probably just self-delusion, and partnering with them will cost you dearly. The delusional will burn through your capital, your time, and your opportunities while genuinely believing they're building something great. And when it inevitably fails, they'll move on to the next big idea with undiminished enthusiasm, leaving you to count the cost of believing in their delusion. Munger developed a checklist for spotting the delusional before they could do serious damage. These weren't foolproof, but they were highly predictive. If someone checked multiple boxes, they were almost certainly delusional, and you should run. First warning sign, they talk in superlatives and absolutes. This will definitely revolutionize the industry. Everyone needs this product. Will be worth billions in 5 years. The delusional doesn't deal in probabilities or ranges. They deal in certainties that haven't been earned. Second warning sign, they dismiss or rationalize away every criticism. You raise a concern. They have a pat answer that makes you feel silly for worrying. You point out a competitor. They explain why that competitor is completely different or doesn't matter. You question a projection. They overwhelm you with data that sounds impressive but doesn't actually address your question. Third warning sign. They have elaborate explanations for past failures that absolve them of responsibility. The timing was wrong. The partners were wrong. The market wasn't ready. They were ahead of their time. It's never I misjudged the market or I didn't execute well. It's always external factors that conspired against a fundamentally sound vision. Fourth warning sign. They need your money or commitment immediately. There's always urgency. The opportunity won't wait. Someone else will seize it if you don't act now. This urgency is designed to bypass your rational analysis. The delusional knows that if you think too carefully, you'll see the flaws, so they create pressure to decide quickly. Fifth warning sign: their projections show hockey stick growth with no explanation for what drives the inflection point. Revenue is flat or modest for a while, then suddenly explodes. When you ask why, they give vague answers about market adoption or reaching critical mass without explaining what specifically will cause that shift. Sixth warning sign: they're offended by due diligence. If you want to verify their claims, talk to their references or review their financials carefully. They act hurt. They thought you trusted them. They thought you believed in the vision. Why are you being so negative? This is a huge red flag. Legitimate opportunities welcome scrutiny. Delusional ones can't survive it. Munger saw a pattern where the delusional often sought out partners who were successful in other fields. They wanted the credibility, the capital, and the connections that came with partnering with someone established. But they also wanted partners who wouldn't know enough about their specific domain to spot the flaws in their vision. A tech entrepreneur would partner with a successful doctor. A restaurant concept would target lawyers as investors. A real estate scheme would pitch to tech executives. The delusional instinctively knew to seek out smart, successful people who were just ignorant enough about the specific opportunity to be vulnerable to persuasion. Munger's final test was this: ask them to articulate what could go wrong. Not minor challenges, major risks that could kill the entire venture. If they can't or won't do this honestly, they're delusional. Every legitimate opportunity has serious risks. Every honest entrepreneur knows what could destroy their vision. The delusional can't acknowledge these risks because acknowledging them would threaten their delusion. The emotional difficulty of cutting ties with the delusional is that they make you feel like you're giving up on something great. They make you feel like you lack vision, like you're too conservative, like you're going to regret missing this opportunity, and some small part of you worries they might be right. But Munger learned through painful experience and observation, they're never right. The delusional stay delusional. They move from failed venture to failed venture, always convinced the next one will work, and they leave a trail of partners and investors who gave them money, time and belief, and got nothing back but lessons in how to spot delusion earlier next time. The third archetype Munger identified was the most dangerous: the destroyer. Unlike the drain, who needs help, and the delusional, who needs believers, the destroyer actively wants to burn everything down, and they're often the hardest to spot until the damage is irreversible. The destroyer is motivated by envy, resentment, or a need for chaos. They see your success as an offense. Your wealth bothers them. Your stability irritates them. Your happiness feels like an accusation. And whether consciously or not, they set out to destroy what you've built. The destroyer comes in two forms. The first is the toxic romantic partner who sabotages your financial life. They encourage bad spending. They resist your efforts to save. They pressure you into purchases you can't afford. They create drama that derails your career. They're financially reckless themselves and drag you down to their level. Munger watched marriages destroy accumulated wealth with frightening speed. One partner had built substantial savings over decades. Then they married someone who didn't share their values around money. Within a few years, the savings were gone, spent on maintaining a lifestyle the destroyer insisted on, consumed by emergencies that the destroyer created, or lost in a divorce where the destroyer's lawyers extracted maximum revenge. The second form of destroyer is the business partner who's more interested in ego and control than building value. They make impulsive decisions. They refuse to compromise. They create conflicts with other partners, employees, or clients. They'd rather see the business fail on their terms than succeed on someone else's. Munger knew a man who built a successful business with a partner over 15 years. The business was worth millions, providing both partners with comfortable incomes and growing equity. Then the partner's personality changed. He became paranoid, convinced the other partner was trying to cheat him. He started making unilateral decisions. He fired key employees. He picked fights with their biggest clients. When the original partner tried to address these issues, the destroyer dug in. He'd rather destroy the business than admit he was wrong. Within 2 years, the business collapsed. Both partners lost everything they'd built, but the destroyer seemed almost satisfied. If he couldn't have control, no one could have anything. What makes the destroyer so dangerous is that they're often charming initially. They don't announce themselves as destructive. The toxic romantic partner is exciting, passionate, fun. The destructive business partner is confident, decisive, charismatic. You don't see the danger until you're deeply entangled, financially, legally, emotionally. The warning signs are there, if you know what to look for. The destroyer has a history of burned bridges. Their past relationships ended badly, usually with them as the victim, in their telling. They speak poorly of former friends, partners, or spouses. Everyone wronged them, nobody appreciated them. There's always a long list of people who betrayed them. They're impulsive with major decisions. They don't deliberate, weigh options, or seek counsel. They decide emotionally and rationalize later, and they expect you to support their impulsive decisions without question. If you raise concerns, you're not being supportive. If you counsel caution, you don't believe in them. They keep score in relationships. They remember every slight, every disagreement, every time you didn't do what they wanted. They bring up old conflicts as weapons in new arguments. Nothing is ever resolved. It's just ammunition stored for later use. They need to win every conflict, even when winning serves no purpose. It's not about finding the best solution. It's about proving they were right and you were wrong. They'd rather be right and destroy value than compromise and build it. Munger believed that the destroyer was motivated by what he called reciprocal altruism in reverse. Instead of building people up, they tear them down. Instead of wanting the best for others, they want others to suffer their same pain. Instead of sharing success, they want to create shared failure. The most destructive thing about the destroyer is that they're often impossible to separate from once you're entangled. The toxic spouse will make divorce as painful and expensive as possible. The destructive business partner will use every legal tool to maximize your suffering. They don't care about the cost to themselves. Hurting you is the goal. Munger's advice on handling a destroyer was the most extreme of his 3 archetypes. You don't handle them, you escape, and you do it fast, accepting whatever financial loss is necessary to get free before they can do more damage. The instinct most people have is to try to fix the relationship, to communicate better, to find compromises, to address their concerns. But Munger believed this was exactly wrong. You can't fix a destroyer because they don't want to be fixed. They want destruction. Trying to salvage the relationship just gives them more time and opportunity to burn everything down. He told a story about a business partner situation where he advised immediate dissolution, even though it would cost substantial money. The other partner resisted, believing they could work things out. 6 months later, the situation had deteriorated so badly that dissolution cost 3 times as much, plus the business had lost major clients and key employees. The man who hesitated said the same thing Munger heard from everyone who waited too long to escape a destroyer. I didn't think it would get that bad. I thought we could find a solution. I didn't want to give up on what we'd built. But that's the trap. The destroyer counts on your reluctance to abandon what you've invested. They know you'll try to preserve the business, the marriage, the partnership, and every day you try is another day they can do damage. Munger's protocol for a destroyer was brutal in its simplicity. First, accept that the relationship is over. Stop trying to save it. Stop looking for the version of this person you thought you knew. That version either never existed or has been replaced by something toxic. Second, document everything. Every conversation, every decision, every financial transaction. The destroyer will rewrite history. They'll claim agreements that never happened. They'll accuse you of things you never did. Documentation is your only defense. Third, get lawyers involved immediately. Not to be aggressive, to protect yourself. The destroyer will use every legal tool available to hurt you. You need professional protection before they start attacking. Fourth, separate finances as quickly as possible. Every day your money is entangled with a destroyer is a day they can damage your financial position. Close joint accounts, separate assets, create walls between their financial chaos and your financial security. Fifth, accept the financial cost of escape. The destroyer will extract a price for your freedom. They'll demand more than is fair. They'll use the legal system to maximize your pain. Pay it. Whatever they take is less than what they'll take if you stay engaged longer. Sixth, cut all unnecessary contact once the separation is complete. The destroyer will try to stay in your life. They'll find excuses to contact you. They'll want to relitigate old arguments. Don't engage. Every interaction is an opportunity for them to create new problems. Munger watched people violate every one of these rules because they couldn't accept that someone they'd trusted had become toxic. They wanted to believe the relationship could be salvaged. They wanted to avoid the financial and emotional cost of separation. They wanted to be fair and reasonable, but you can't be fair with someone who's trying to destroy you. You can't be reasonable with someone who's operating from resentment and envy. You can't salvage a relationship with someone who's more interested in your failure than their own success. The people who escape destroyers quickly almost always said the same thing afterward. I should have left earlier. Every day I stayed cost me more than I realized. The people who tried to make it work, who gave multiple chances, who kept believing things would improve. They lost not just money but years of their lives, and sometimes their entire financial foundation. Munger's final piece of advice on destroyers was perhaps the hardest to follow. Don't try to warn others about them. The destroyer will find new partners, new friends, new romantic interests. You'll be tempted to warn these people about what's coming. Don't. They won't believe you, and the destroyer will use your warnings as evidence that you're vindictive and bitter. Save your energy. They'll figure it out in their own time, just like you did. Munger spent just as much time thinking about prevention as he did about escape. The best way to handle these three types of people is to never let them close enough to do damage in the first place, and that required something most people resist: building financial boundaries from the beginning. The first boundary was simple: never mix money and friendship without clear legal structures. If a friend needs a loan, only lend what you can afford to lose and assume you'll never see it back. If you're not comfortable losing it, don't lend it. Don't make exceptions for people you like. Don't convince yourself this friend is different. Friendship and money don't mix unless both parties understand and accept the risks. The second boundary: carefully vet business partners before committing. Munger believed you should investigate a potential partner more carefully than you'd investigate a stock purchase. Talk to their former partners. Ask why previous ventures ended. Look for patterns of conflict, blame, or failure. 1 or 2 failures is normal. A string of failures where everyone else was at fault is a massive red flag. The third boundary: maintain separate finances in romantic relationships until marriage, and even then consider protecting premarital assets. This isn't about lack of trust. It's about acknowledging that people change, circumstances change, and financial entanglement makes bad situations catastrophic. Munger watched too many people lose decades of accumulated wealth in divorces because they hadn't protected their assets. The fourth boundary: establish clear financial rules with family members. Decide in advance what you will and won't help with. Emergencies? Maybe. Business ideas? No. Lifestyle support? Definitely not. And communicate these boundaries clearly so everyone knows where you stand. Most family financial disasters happen because boundaries were unclear until crisis forced clarity. The fifth boundary: trust your discomfort. If something feels wrong about a person's financial behavior, if they're evasive about money, if they dismiss your concerns, if they pressure you to decide quickly, listen to that discomfort. Munger believed that your unconscious often spots problems before your conscious mind can articulate them. Don't ignore red flags just because you can't quite explain what bothers you. The sixth boundary: maintain financial independence as a non-negotiable priority. Never let yourself become financially dependent on someone else, and never let someone become completely financially dependent on you. Dependency creates unhealthy dynamics where bad behavior can't be addressed because the stakes are too high. Munger practiced these boundaries rigorously in his own life. He had business partners, but they had clear legal agreements. He had friends, but he didn't lend money. He had family, but he didn't subsidize lifestyle choices. He was generous in specific, bounded ways, but he never let anyone get into a position where they could threaten his financial security. This made him seem cold to some people. Family members who wanted help thought he was stingy. Friends with business ideas thought he didn't believe in them. Romantic partners might have felt he was withholding, but Munger had watched too many generous people get destroyed by the people they helped. The reality is that these boundaries protect both parties. When you have clear financial boundaries, relationships can be genuine rather than transactional. Friends can be friends without the complication of debt. Family can be family without the resentment that comes from one person subsidizing another. Business partners can focus on building value rather than managing interpersonal drama. Most people resist these boundaries because they feel harsh. They want to believe that good intentions and genuine affection are enough to prevent financial toxicity. But Munger knew that some of the worst financial damage comes from people with good intentions. The drain genuinely needs help. The delusional genuinely believes in their vision. Even the destroyer often believes they're the victim who's finally fighting back. Good intentions don't pay your bills. Genuine affection doesn't compound in investment accounts. And at some point, you have to choose between protecting people's feelings and protecting your financial future. Munger chose his future every time, and he built boundaries that made that choice automatic rather than emotional. Despite all prevention efforts, Munger recognized that sometimes you don't spot these people until after they've done damage. You were too trusting, too hopeful, or simply unlucky in who you encountered. And that raises the question, how do you recover financially after one of these three types has taken a piece of your wealth? The first step, Munger believed, was to stop the bleeding immediately. Cut ties completely. Don't try to salvage the relationship. Don't try to recover what's lost. Don't seek revenge or justice. Just stop the interaction so no more damage can occur. The money they've already taken is gone. Accept it, and move on so they can't take more. This is where most people fail at recovery. They stay engaged trying to fix what went wrong, recover what was lost, or prove the other person was at fault. And every day they stay engaged is another day of opportunity cost, emotional drain, and potential additional loss. Munger watched a man spend 3 years and $100,000 in legal fees trying to recover $200,000 from a former business partner. Even if he won, which he didn't, the net recovery would have been minimal. Meanwhile, 3 years of his life and earning potential were consumed by anger and litigation. That $100,000 in legal fees, invested instead of spent, would have grown to replace much of what he lost. The second step was to analyze what happened without emotion. Not to beat yourself up, but to identify the warning signs you missed so you'd spot them earlier next time. Was there a pattern of behavior you ignored? Did people warn you, and you didn't listen? Did you violate your own boundaries because you wanted to believe in someone? Munger conducted these post-mortems on his own mistakes rigorously. The friend who kept asking for investment in failed businesses, Munger had seen the pattern by investment 3. He should have stopped then. He didn't, because he wanted to believe the next time would be different. Lesson learned: patterns don't break just because you hope they will. The third step was to rebuild financial defenses stronger than before. If you got burned by a drain, establish clearer rules about lending money. If you got taken by the delusional, develop better due diligence practices. If you escaped a destroyer, create stronger legal protections before entering future partnerships or relationships. The fourth step, and perhaps most important, don't become cynical. Munger watched people swing from too trusting to too suspicious. They'd been burned, so now they trusted no one. They rejected legitimate opportunities because they couldn't distinguish between reasonable risk and red flags. The goal isn't to wall yourself off from all relationships and opportunities. It's to develop better judgment about which relationships and opportunities are worth the risk. Most people are neither saviors nor threats. They're just people with their own issues and limitations. The skill is identifying the specific archetypes that cause disproportionate damage and filtering those out while remaining open to genuine connection and collaboration with everyone else. Munger believed that financial recovery from these three types was usually straightforward if you cut ties decisively. Money can be replaced. Compound interest works whether you start at 30 or restart at 45. The mathematics don't care about your past. They only care about what you do going forward. The harder recovery was psychological. People who'd been burned by a drain felt guilty for cutting them off, even years later. People who'd been fooled by the delusional felt stupid for falling for it. People who'd survived a destroyer often carried anger and resentment for years. Munger's advice was to separate the financial recovery from the emotional recovery. Financially, you just needed to start saving and investing again. The math would take care of the rest given enough time. Emotionally, you needed to forgive yourself for being human. Accept that everyone makes mistakes with people. and commit to using the lessons without letting them poison future relationships. One mistake Munger saw repeatedly was people trying to warn others about the person who damaged them. The drain would find new people to drain. The delusional would find new believers. The destroyer would find new targets, and the victims wanted to warn these new people, to save them from what they'd experienced. But this rarely worked and often backfired. The new targets wouldn't believe the warnings. They'd see you as bitter or vindictive. The toxic person would use your warnings as proof that you were the problem, not them. And staying engaged enough to warn others kept you emotionally entangled when you should have been moving on. Munger's final advice on recovery was simple. The best revenge is living well. The toxic person is hoping they've permanently damaged you. Prove them wrong by rebuilding, by succeeding, by moving forward. Not because you want them to see it, but because that's how you reclaim your life and your financial future. Charlie Munger lived to 99 years old. Over nearly a century, he watched thousands of financial destinies play out, and one of the clearest patterns he saw was this: your financial future is determined as much by who you keep out of your life as by what you do with your money. You can have perfect investment strategy, impeccable savings discipline, brilliant business instincts, but if you let a drain, a delusional, or a destroyer into your financial life, all of that can be undone. These three archetypes destroy wealth more efficiently than any market crash, any bad investment, any economic downturn. The reason is simple: markets recover. Bad investments can be offset by good ones. Economic downturns end, but the damage these three types of people do compounds over time. Every year you're entangled with them is a year of lost compounding, missed opportunities, and emotional drain that affects your decision-making. Munger's fundamental message was this: you cannot save people from themselves. The drain will stay drained. The delusional will stay delusional. The destroyer will stay destructive. These are not temporary conditions. They're fundamental orientations to the world that don't change just because you care about them or want to help them. Your only choice is whether you'll let them take your wealth down with them. And that choice is entirely under your control, regardless of relationship history, family ties, or emotional bonds. You get to decide who has access to your financial life. Most people struggle with this because it feels cruel. You care about these people. You want to help. You want to believe they'll change. And cutting them off feels like abandonment, like betrayal, like admitting you don't have faith in them. But Munger would ask a simple question: what's more cruel, cutting them off and preserving your financial future, or enabling them until you're both broke? What's more loyal, protecting your own security so you're not a burden to others, or sacrificing your security for someone who won't benefit from the sacrifice? The people who successfully protected themselves from these three archetypes all made the same choice. They valued their own financial security over other people's feelings, not because they were selfish, but because they understood that you can't help anyone if you're drowning yourself. And here's what Munger observed: the people who set these boundaries early were often able to maintain relationships on healthier terms later. When you stop being someone's financial bailout, they either get their life together or move on to someone else. Either way, you're no longer enabling their dysfunction. The drain who can't extract money from you might actually develop self-sufficiency. The delusional who can't recruit you for their schemes might face reality and pursue something more grounded. The destroyer who can't hurt you financially might work out their issues with someone else, or they might not, but that's not your responsibility. What is your responsibility is protecting what you've built. You've worked too hard, saved too diligently, and invested too carefully to let someone else destroy it. Whether they're family, friends, or romantic partners, doesn't matter. The math doesn't care about your feelings. It just compounds or doesn't compound based on whether you protect your capital. Munger's final word on this subject was simple: wealth is hard to build and easy to destroy. The three people who will ruin your wealth are counting on you to choose relationships over resources. Choose resources. The relationships worth having will survive your boundaries. The ones that don't survive weren't based on genuine connection anyway. They were based on your utility as an economic resource. You get one financial life, one opportunity to build security, one chance to compound your capital over decades. Don't sacrifice it for people who won't appreciate the sacrifice, and won't change despite it. Protect yourself. Be ruthless about who you let near your money, and remember that every dollar they take is a dollar that won't compound into your freedom. The choice is yours. But Munger watched too many people make the wrong choice and regret it for the rest of their lives. Don't be one of them.